How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
Hello, America. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the nation, maybe a little more fired up than I should be today. I gotta talk. Charlie, just keep the phones on hold for a minute. There's no reason to get phone calls yet. I'm just gonna start. We'll get to everything else, all of the housekeeping stuff later. We have reached the spaghetti at the wall phase of this campaign, where reporters across America are throwing everything they possibly can at the wall, hoping something sticks. And it is important that you understand it's not the Democrats, it's the American Press Corps. Gallup is reporting today that at this point, the press in America has less trust than ever before. Fewer Americans trust members of the American media now than at any time since Gallup has done its surveys. And that's across the board, bipartisan, Democrat, Independent, Republican. Nobody trusts the media. And how can you? For the second presidential election in a row, Jeffrey Goldberg of The Atlantic has trotted out anonymous sources to claim Donald Trump made disparaging comments about troops. Every source on the record denies it, and all the anonymous sources say it's so. We don't know who the anonymous sources is. It could be Jeffrey Goldberg's gas, as far as we know. But he trades on his reputation and his friendship with members of the media for them to give legitimacy to a story that no other media outlet under its standards, including The Atlantic, by the way, would run if it had something to do with anyone other than Donald Trump, because all of the sources are anonymous. No one wanted to go on the record about it. It's like the losers comment about dead soldiers in 2020. John Bolton, who cannot stand Donald Trump and does not think he's fit for office, flat out denied that that's something Donald Trump would have said. Every person who hates Donald Trump who worked for him came out and said this isn't so. He said a lot of stuff. He hasn't said that. It didn't matter. They ran with it. And now they're with this other one that Donald Trump complained about how expensive a funeral was for a quote-unquote effing Mexican that he said he would pay for. You know who's denying the story? That dead soldier's sister. But the media doesn't care. They are throwing stuff at the walls. They're grappling to try to find stuff. And allegedly, there are all sorts of October surprises they want to throw. Here's Mark Halperin.
These last 2 weeks are going to be filled with things like this. And I can tell you, without going into detail, that I've been pitched a story about Donald Trump now for about a week that, if true, would end his campaign. And there's all sorts of things like that flying around. I'm not the only one who's been pitched it.
You know, here's the problem. If they run with something poorly sourced and the Trump campaign can deny it, it's just going to push him over the finish line. In fact, short of a story that documents on videotape Donald Trump raping illegal aliens and throwing him in a wood chipper to get rid of the bodies, I have a hard time believing at this point what could cost him his election. And even that might actually win him some points if they were gang members. People don't trust the American media. Listen to Jonathan Karl and George Stephanopoulos and their hand-wringing about Donald Trump and what a second term might mean for Donald Trump. George Stephanopoulos, who worked for Bill Clinton, who the National Press Corps treats as an objective, fair reporter who is anything but.
Well, I've spoken to Trump many times about some of these people that have crossed him, and I asked him what his next administration would be like. What he's told me is he didn't know anybody. He had to rely on advice to hire people last time. Now he knows people. He will put people in who are loyal to him. He will put people in that will carry out his orders.
The guardrails will be gone.
Yeah.
The guardrails will be gone. The guardrails. It'll become the beginning of the end of Donald Trump for the second time. where, I mean, the day of his election in 2016, they began talking about impeachment. It's the beginning of the end, beginning of the end. The walls are closing in. To members of the American Press Corps, you were complicit in covering up the mental decline of the current president of the United States. You covered for Kamala Harris. Democrats on background were willing to tell you she would be a terrible candidate, and you chose to do nothing. And you say there's nothing you could have done, except there was something you could have done. If Donald Trump is really the existential threat that you claim he is, and by the way, it is you, it's not the Democrats, it's members of the press on ABC, CBS, NBC, MSNBC, CNN, with the exception of Fox News, all the other networks, PBS, CNBC, Donald Trump, he's going to be Hitler. I mean, they actually do want Donald Trump dead. I mean, you listen to the conversations on Morning Joe on MSNBC. There are people there who would cheer if Donald Trump died, and they know it, and they can't say it. But you know, and I know, they would be gleeful if Donald Trump were assassinated. And you know what you guys didn't do, particularly you on MSNBC, you know what you guys didn't do? Is you didn't pressure the Democrats to moderate their positions. So many of the Republicans I know who dislike Donald Trump might feel comfortable either staying home or voting for you. You never wanted to do that. You were convinced that the Democrats could have their cake and eat it too, that Donald Trump was so terrible because you guys hate him, that surely every American would hate him as much as you, and there was no reason the Democrats couldn't go for broke. They got him. They got him. You know what you got? You threw Brer Rabbit in the briar patch, and he's about to kick your butt at the polls. There was never any question to you that maybe the Democrats should moderate their positions. Kamala Harris was interviewed on NBC News last night. Listen to this.
What concessions would be on the table? Religious exemptions, for example? Is that something that you would consider?
I don't think we should be making concessions when we're talking about a fundamental freedom to make decisions about your own body.
To Republicans like, for example, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, who would back something like this on a Democratic agenda if, in fact, Republicans control Congress, would you offer them an olive branch, or is that off the table? Is that not an option for you?
I'm not going to engage in hypotheticals.
Notice she says killing a child, which is not in the Constitution, is a fundamental right, but religious freedom, which is in the Constitution, is not a fundamental right. Kamala Harris just alienated herself from a persuadable block of voters who believe that Catholic charities and hospitals and the Baptist hospitals should not be forced to perform abortions against their will, and nuns should not be forced to pay for abortions in insurance policies for their employees. Kamala Harris just staked out a perfectly radical position that defies the will of a large number of Americans, and those Americans, some of whom might sit on the sidelines, aren't going to go vote for her now because in addition to the comment the other day when the guys yelled Christ is King at her rally, she said no religious exceptions when it comes to funding the murder of children. And you people in the press have said jack about this. You haven't cared one whit. There's been no call by you for her to moderate any position she's taken. There's been no call by you to rein in the Democrats in the United States Senate who have said they want to get rid of the filibuster and pack the Supreme Court. And guess what? Kamala Harris came out for it. You people in the press are so high on your own supply, nobody trusts you anymore, because if Donald Trump were to come out and say he worked at a McDonald's in the 1980s, you would leave no stone unturned to find that store that he worked at and wouldn't believe him until you did. Kamala Harris comes out and says she worked at one of the 1980s. Well, it must be true. She can't name the store. She can't name the location. No one has a record of it. Did you know you can go onto the Social Security's website and pull up your benefits, and it will list anywhere Social Security was paid in by you all the way back to the 1970s and 80s? She can't go on that website and produce a statement showing she worked at McDonald's? Yeah, by the way, you can actually do that. Now, I wasn't working in the 1980s, but I can find the stuff from the 1990s on that website. Friends of mine who are older than me say that their stuff from the 80s is there as well. Kamala Harris could have done that. No credibility whatsoever. Kamala Harris could say that she worked for NASA and helped put a man on the moon, and you people at the New York Times would roll up her statement and go blind with it in the bathroom. You'd be so excited by it. You have no credibility whatsoever left. You never even thought about trying to get her to moderate her position, and now you have the audacity to come out with these stories claiming Donald Trump is a threat to democracy and we have 12 days left to stop him. The guardrails will come off if Donald Trump is president. Well, you know what? You could have done something about it. You could have taken Republican concerns about Joe Biden's mental fitness seriously. And not only did you not, NBC News claimed it was a Republican conspiracy that Democrats might throw him off the ballot. Jonathan Martin in Politico in February of 2023, this is the subtitle to his story. The GOP fantasy crowd is so accustomed to conspiracy theories that they're betting the Democrats will switch candidates at the last minute. Have they actually paid attention to politics? Yes, you horse's rear end. We paid attention to Democrats trying to capture and keep power for years. We've seen the Democrats throw people like Jim McGreevey off the ballot. We've seen Democrats throw other people out of office just so they can keep power. Were you the one paying attention? You arrogant horse's rear end. Did you pay attention? Because we have paid attention. And you people just think the Democrats could get away with anything and had no reason to moderate any position to try to stop Donald Trump, who you've argued is a threat to democracy. And then when Republicans and voters told you, you know what, he's not a threat to democracy, but Joe Biden's a threat to my checkbook, said, you hateful, stupid bigots, the economy's fine. Joe Biden says so. And then they would correct it, and it turns out the economy's not so well. Well, who cares about the correction? Look at this month's numbers. They're good too. And then they'd correct it. You say, who cares about that numbers? Look at the new numbers. The new numbers are just as good. And then they'd correct it and walk it back, and you say, but. That's why nobody trusts you. Funny thing happened yesterday. Joe Biden was wandering a stage in New Hampshire and decided Donald Trump needs to be locked up.
Bizarre. It sounds like if I said this 5 years ago, you'd lock me up. We got to lock him up. Politically lock him up.
Oh, so he walked politically. I mean, politically. You have the president of the United States of America calling for Donald Trump to be locked up. And you know what? This is a quote from an actual sitting official in the White House. Quote, for better or worse, no one is listening to him anymore. And his words have little power and less reach. It's a blip. Gone in any meaningful way by midday tomorrow, if it makes makes it that long. And very dutifully, you people in the press moved on. You got your instructions from this White House, and you moved on from the sitting president of the United States who's used the Department of Justice to prosecute Donald Trump, saying he needs to be locked up, and nobody listens to that guy anymore. And you don't even ask a question about, hey, who has the nuclear codes if no one listens to this guy anymore? Who has the nuclear codes? Your arrogance has gotten you exactly what you've deserved, being on the verge of 4 more years of Donald Trump so he can regale you with further tales about Arnold Palmer's manhood. And you Democrats who were so arrogant to think you could run against Donald Trump and not have to compromise anything, not have to moderate any position, and could go for broke because surely there's no way the American public would vote for Donald Trump. Maybe you should spend the next 4 years, if he wins, asking yourself just how out of touch with the American people you are, that it never dawned on you that Americans who can't buy groceries or gas might prefer the guy under whose administration they could afford those things than the woman who was complicit in raising their prices while saying it wasn't her fault. Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States of America. I got to tell you, I do want to spend time on what possibly could be going wrong for the GOP, because I'm trying to do reality checks for myself because I want to be very honest with you. I really thought, not that I'm never not honest with you. There are some things I just tell myself, probably better not say that. I really have thought for a portion of this year that we would come down to the last month of this election and I would be trying to subtly begin planting the seeds in your mind that things didn't look good for Donald Trump and he was probably going to lose. And I am now trying to convince myself that it is not as good for him as I think it is. I'm trying to find reasons to say it's not good and forget the whole red wave in 2022 because the pollsters who contributed to showing the red wave, they're out of the models. They've been thrown out. They're not there, and the models look good. It could be ground game. It could be hoaxes, all of these sorts of things. But all you have to do is look at the Democrats. They look miserable. And here is another data point for you on how miserable the Democrats look. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are going to campaign in Florida, Texas, and Kentucky. They are not going to win those states. Now, I bring that up because in 1996, when the Bob Dole campaign realized that Bob Dole was not going to beat Bill Clinton in the last 2 weeks of the election, Bob Dole began campaigning in Illinois, New York, California, and Florida, places he was not going to win. But he did it to prop up congressional races and help Republicans mitigate the damage of his loss. And suddenly Kamala Harris and Tim Walz appear to be doing the exact same thing. Kamala Harris has no events scheduled for today, official or unofficial. She's off the campaign trail. Donald Trump is been in North Carolina. He's doing an event in New York, going over to Pennsylvania, then down to Miami. J.D. Vance is in Nevada, in Las Vegas. The polling in Nevada is collapsing for Kamala Harris. She went from being up several points to now being tied with Donald Trump there in the last 2 weeks of the race. It doesn't look like Kamala Harris's team thinks she's winning right now. They're waiting for an external event to throw the race their way, and reporters are desperate to try to manufacture that external event, and it doesn't seem to be happening right now. Now, before we go away, I got to tell you about Americans for Prosperity because they're out knocking on doors. There have been some reports about some groups that are their door knockers aren't actually knocking on doors. They're saying they are, but they aren't. Americans for Prosperity is actually out there knocking on the doors. They absolutely are engaged. They would love to have you on the team. All you need to do is go to americansforprosperity.org/volunteer today. americansforprosperity.org/volunteer. You sign up with them, and they will let you. They'll train you how to be a door knocker, how to make the case for common sense conservative reforms, how to advocate for families and free markets and for small businesses and for school choice. Just go to americansforprosperity.org/volunteer today. Sign up with AFP. They got chapters in just about every single state now. They would love to have you on board with them. americansforprosperity.org/volunteer is the website. Train with AFP. Learn how to advocate for common sense conservative solutions. When we come back, what is the data on the ground? Let's do an actual reality check on this election. Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States of America. Delighted to have you with me. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Remember, we start our live events 2 days after the election at KRMG in Tulsa, Oklahoma. If you live out there and go to krmg.com or use the KRMG app, there's a link you can fill out. It's a free event, but you got to pre-register to come to the event. You are more than welcome to come. We'd love to have you. I want to start with JC's phone call before I move into this reality check because it's relevant to it. JC, welcome to the Eric Erickson Show. How are you?
I'm wonderful, Eric. How are you?
Great.
Good. Hey, I just want to talk about if you could elaborate why things are so bad for Kamala based on where she's campaigning. I remember in 2016, Trump was campaigning in California, in New York. I thought at the time that was really kind of odd. And then at the same time, a lot of polls showed Hillary Clinton winning at like 92%. So I'm trying not to get my hopes up about all this good news that I'm hearing about Trump winning. because looking back, 2016, he did all these weird things, and he ended up winning. So can you elaborate on that,
and let's keep in mind, too, in 2016, he did lose the popular vote. And, in fact, the overall presidential polling wasn't terrible because it captured that loss, but he won the Electoral College. One of the things Trump was doing in 2016, like he's doing now that people have missed, is he went to Southern California and he went to Madison Square Garden doing events because of Long Island voters in New York and congressional districts, and same in Southern California. He's trying for the trifecta. And that, by the way, that's Kamala Harris's excuse. Kamala Harris's excuse is that she's trying for this trifecta. She wants to save the Senate. She wants to beat Ted Cruz, except Colin Allred, very few polls suggest he has any chance of beating Ted Cruz. If Kamala Harris really wanted to have an impact on the Senate, she would go to Wisconsin and campaign with Tammy Baldwin. And not only is she not doing that, Tammy Baldwin doesn't want to campaign with her. She would go to Pennsylvania and campaign with Bob Casey. Bob Casey didn't want to campaign with her. She would go to Michigan and campaign with Elise Slotkin. Slotkin didn't want to campaign with her. It's kind of wild. So she's going to go to areas where she's not going to win, like Florida, to try to help Democrats, when there are plenty of swing states she could be going to helping do this. And they're not doing it. I mean, Trump had a rationale for California, New York. He wasn't going to win those areas, but he went to Southern California where there are some swing districts. He went to New York. The Long Island Railway goes into Madison Square, underneath Madison Square Garden. You want to impact Long Island, you can go do an event at Madison Square Garden. A lot of people are going to commute in and out to Long Island from that point, so he can shape those House races. Kamala Harris sending Tim Walz to Kentucky today while she does nothing. She's done very few events. It doesn't seem to be working for her. This is something I think a lot of people don't understand about the way elections tend to work in this country. They all tend to break the same way at the end. So if you have very tight races in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada, you're not going to have each one decide its own path. By and large, the majority of them are all going to go in the same direction, if not all of them go in the same direction. Now, just because they all go in the same direction doesn't mean that they're all going to be won by the same person. Let's say they all go in Kamala Harris's direction. But in Georgia, she's 5 points behind. By the time you get to Election Day, she may be 1 point behind, so she still loses it, even though the momentum was in her direction. I say with Kamala Harris because the reality is the momentum is with Donald Trump now. Kamala Harris has begun to decline in Nevada. Now, I have given you guys multiple statements about you can only read so much in the early vote. And it's true. You can only read so much in the early vote. But Nevada Democrats are beginning to sound the alarm over the turnout in Nevada. The Republican turnout is so disproportionate to what they've expected that Kamala Harris is going to have to win independents overwhelmingly on Election Day in order to be able to win Nevada right now. And Democrats are sounding the alarm. You've got to get people turning out. In parts of Wisconsin now, the early vote turnout exceeds the early vote turnout of 2020 when most people were voting, which suggests this is going to be a high turnout election after all, which I didn't see coming. I thought it was going to be very low turnout. But it's looking like it's a very high turnout. And if that's the case, the higher the turnout, the better it is for Trump, because low propensity voters help Donald Trump. The people who we know are going to vote were going to be 5 points in Kamala Harris's favor. So what's the reality? Let's do a reality check here. Here's the reality check, and this is the data. This is not me. These are not my opinions. I don't want you to rely on my opinion here. I want to just look at the data. Here is the data. The data from the polling averages is that Kamala Harris will win by 5%. The voters who voted in 2020 and 2016, she'll win them by 5%. Donald Trump, however, will win low propensity voters by a greater percentage. Based on the early voting we know in Pennsylvania, in Georgia, in Wisconsin, in Nevada, in Arizona, we can see that low propensity voters are turning out at a higher rate for early voting than they did in 2020. Right now, we see Kamala Harris not on the ground anywhere today. She's doing a town hall with CNN in Philadelphia tonight. She has Tim Walz campaigning in Kentucky. Donald Trump is doing multiple events in Georgia today. J.D. Vance is in Las Vegas, Nevada. Yesterday, Gallup released some final polling before the election. 52% of Americans say they believe the economy was better 4 years ago than today. 62% of Americans believe the economy is actually getting worse now, not better. 60% of Americans believe that Donald Trump would be better for them on the economy than Kamala Harris. 60% believe Donald Trump would be better on immigration than Kamala Harris. 55% believe Donald Trump would be better on inflation than Kamala Harris. 56% believe Donald Trump will be better on crime than Kamala Harris. Those are the top four issues. The number one issue is the economy, and Donald Trump leads that issue. Kamala Harris is raking in more money than Donald Trump. That sounds like voter enthusiasm for Kamala Harris until you remember how campaign finance laws work. Kamala Harris was not a presidential candidate until August. So all of the people who maxed out money to Joe Biden couldn't give Joe Biden any more money, and all these people can now give Kamala Harris money, and they can't give Donald Trump money because they've maxed out. So, of course, she's going to pull in more small-dollar donors at the end of a campaign when she's a new candidate than Donald Trump, who these people have maxed out to over the last 2 years. The data just seems to suggest that things are trending towards Donald Trump. Now, there are 13 days, and I need to say this. It is, by all accounts, still a tied race. I'm growing optimistic that Donald Trump can win. But Donald Trump could be blown out of the water in the next 12 days. Donald Trump could stand on stage and say something so profoundly stupid that voters think, oh, he's lost his mind. Here's Nate Silver's data based on the polling averages. Nationwide, it's Harris 48.8, Donald Trump 47.2. In Arizona, Trump's ahead 49.47. In Florida, Trump's ahead 51.44. In Georgia, Trump's ahead 49.47. In Michigan, Harris is ahead 48 to 47.5. In Minnesota, Harris is ahead 50 to 44. In Nevada, Harris is ahead 48 to Trump 47.6. In New Hampshire, Harris is ahead 50-44. In North Carolina, Trump's ahead 48-7 to 47-7 Harris. In Pennsylvania, it's statistically tied 48-48. In Texas, Trump is ahead 51.5 to 45.2. In Virginia, Harris is ahead 50.6 to Trump 43.1. In Wisconsin, Harris is ahead 48.6 to 47.9. What's the lay of the land? For the Electoral College, according to Nate Silver, Donald Trump has a 53.1% chance of carrying the Electoral College. Kamala Harris at this point only has a chance of 50.5% winning the popular vote. I'm sorry. No. Sorry. Misread that. She's got a 73% chance of winning the popular vote, but only a 46% chance of winning the Electoral College. Y'all, the polling, the support, the campaigning, the buzz, the vibes, the energy, all of this at this point points towards Donald Trump is in the lead. The polling has begun to reflect it. And then there's this. In 2016 and in 2020, Donald Trump outperformed his polling. Now, there are some pollsters who say at this point, Trump voters are so comfortable identifying as Trump voters that the pollsters are catching them. The problem is that when Donald Trump is polling best with low propensity voters who are turning out, they might not be catching them. So yes, this is absolutely a tied race. But in tied political races across the country, the momentum all flows in the same direction. It doesn't split scattershot. And the momentum is all flowing towards Donald Trump right now. We're going to get to the end of the week, and a sizable segment of the voting population, perhaps a third to half of all voters, will have voted in the next week before the election even happens. There could be an October surprise. It could shake things up. But how much can it shake things up when so many voters have already banked their votes? The Democrats themselves don't look or feel confident. You would not be having the meltdowns you're having in the American press corps right now, screaming about Trump and fascism and Hitler and threats to democracy and the end of America, if they didn't think he might be on the verge of winning. They wouldn't be into histrionics. Kamala Harris started her campaign with joy, and she's ending it with fear. That's not a winning campaign message. That's not what a winning campaign does. The data to me, not my opinion, the data to me right now suggests the momentum is with Donald Trump, that Donald Trump can win this thing. Now, everybody's got to go vote. You got to go vote. You can't take it for granted. It's not in the bag. It's a tied race. But the campaign events, the schedule of the campaigns, the polling, the reaction of the press, the behavior of the candidates, all of these things begin to tell a story. And there's one story I haven't told you that I need to tell you. But we'll have to save that for after commercial break. First, I need to tell you about Vision Computers. If you need a computer built, Vision Computers would love to build you that computer. They'll save you some money and build you a better machine than what you get at the one-size-fits-all big box store. And you'll get their special super secret number that whenever you have a question about your computer, you can call in 15 seconds or less. You get the answer. All you do is call them at 404-COMPUTE. Tell them I sent you. You're going to save even more money. Go to visioncomputers.com, any one of you nationwide. Now, let's say you're a sole proprietor. You got your own business. Say you work freelance. You sit at the coffee shop, and you need help with your computer. You don't know who to go. You could stand in line at one of those big box stores, or for $179 a year, you can pay Vision, and they will be your tech support solution, and you'll get the super secret number, and you call them, and in 15 seconds or less, you get the answer to the question. Let's say you're sitting in your coffee shop, and there's a problem with email. You call Vision, 15 seconds or less, you get the answer. They can even remote in and take care of things for you. VisionComputers.com, or call them at 404-COMPUTE. They're available anywhere in the United States of America. So if you're listening somewhere on the West Coast or East Coast or New England to me right now, they may be in Atlanta, Georgia, but the Internet's a powerful thing. They can help you anywhere. 404-COMPUTE or VisionComputers.com. The Office of the Vice President is announcing that Kamala Harris will make remarks from her vice presidential residence. She's not on the campaign trail today. She's been coming under some pressure to do more events. I guess this is how she's going to do it. Just weird. Just the whole thing is weird to me that she's doing so little. Look, so here's the other data point in the election, and I want to be diplomatic here. Jonathan Martin is a political columnist for Politico, and I've always liked his writing, but in the last year he's kind of has this unearned, don't you know who I am? I'll tell you the way this place works sort of vibe to his writings, and it's kind of been snotty and belittling to people. And I share his frustrations with some of the lecturing from idiots and who don't know what they're talking about, and I get it. But also, he hasn't really earned the right to act like he's the dean of the press corps, and he sometimes writes that way. And he was the guy in 2023 who wrote that there was no way the Democrats could put Kamala Harris on the ballot because she was a blithering idiot and a bad candidate. And then in February of this year, he writes that these Republican idiots think the Democrats are going to toss Biden at the last minute. Don't they know how politics works? They're not going to do that. Well, look what happened. And since Kamala Harris got into the race, Jonathan Martin has been puffing her up and deflecting any criticism and making excuses. I actually texted a buddy of mine the other day and said he's been so, unflinchingly favorable to Kamala Harris. I'm wondering if he's angling to get the book deal of the inside secret on how she won the election. If he flips on her, this race is over. Well, he flipped today. He flipped. He is deeply frustrated with the Kamala Harris campaign's inability to build a narrative to persuade undecided moderates, and deeply frustrated by it. And that is a tell to me that members of the press corps understand that Kamala Harris is looking more and more like toast. The only question is how burned. It's a sign. Now, this hour of the program is brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan. They are in Noonan, Georgia, but you don't have to be. You can be anywhere in the country. And if your business is growing and you need access to capital, they might be able to help you. If you need heavy equipment loans, if you need building loans, if you need money for a franchise, reach out to First Liberty, see if they can help you. FirstLibertyGA.com. They've been making their own lending decisions since the 90s. They love to help small businesses become big businesses. FirstLibertyGA.com. Tell them I sent you. When we come back, there are various bits of audio and data out there that I want to talk to you about, because the Democrats really are succumbing to the stress of this moment. But it's not just them. Some Republicans are coming to the stress, overwhelmed by the stress as well. And by the way, at the bottom of the hour, a friend of mine who may very well be the next national security advisor to Donald Trump is going to be with me. She's a longtime dear friend of mine, been on the program before, Victoria Coates. She was in the National Security Administration, an apparatus for Trump. She helped structure the Abraham deals. And we're going to talk about Iran and Israel as Israel looks to be preparing for a military strike on Iran. She knows better than anybody the lay of the land. She has all the contacts. She's also got a new book out. So my friend Victoria Coates, who many of you will be familiar with, will be here at the bottom of the next hour. But when we come back, I got to play the audio of the progressive who melted down on her neighbor's front porch when she found out they were voting for Trump.